Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Adam Veal. I am the Deputy Communications Director and Grants Manager for Congresswoman McBath in our Duluth District Office. And we're so grateful to you for joining us for this morning's Department of Justice Grants webinar. At this time, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague in our Washington office, our Legislative Counsel, Brianna Walker.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Adam said, my name is Brianna Walker, and I am Representative Lucy McBath's Legislative Counsel. I staff her for her House Judiciary Committee assignment, covering issue areas such as gun violence prevention and criminal justice, issues very important to the Congresswoman and to our district. We're so pleased that leaders in the community, such as yourself, are able to join us to learn more about the great funding opportunities made available through the Department of Justice and Congresswoman Lucy McBath's tireless work to secure this funding. The funding opportunities we will dive into today will help keep our communities safer, our law enforcement supported, and our families whole. Last summer, Representative McBath led the charge in securing close to $1 billion in funding through the bipartisan Safer Communities Act. $750 million of this was secured for crisis intervention programs, such as the creation and implementation of red flag laws, and $250 million was secured for community violence intervention. This funding has already begun to flow into communities across America, including Georgia, which was recently awarded $7 million for crisis intervention programs, just the beginning of another 4 years of funding awards for the state. And now I am pleased to introduce Congresswoman Lucy McBath, representing Georgia's 7th Congressional District, who will share more about today's briefing. Congresswoman.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Brianna, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, Adam. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. I hope everyone had a really good weekend. And I'm so delighted that so many of our local government leaders are able to join us this morning with my office for this morning's Department of Justice Grants webinar. Truly, it really is an honor to be a partner in service with you. I really am so grateful to serve you and just grateful to work together with you on behalf of the residents of Georgia's 7th Congressional District. This morning, we're going to hear from representatives from 2 divisions of the United States Department of Justice. We're going to actually discuss Department of Justice grants awards timelines. That's really important information we want you to have. The new investments in state crisis intervention and an overview of the major funding opportunities that are available through the department throughout the year. We really want you to take hold of these phenomenal opportunities. And so following presentations from our agency representatives that we have this morning, we'll have time for question and answer. Now, I might have to jump off at that point as I'm heading into the district, but I hope that you really take advantage of this morning's wonderful wealth of knowledge and information from our experts. At any time, if you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A submission box on the Zoom. My staff will be monitoring these submissions, your questions, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we possibly can before the end of the event. But thank you once again for being with us this morning. And now it is my pleasure to hand it over to Cheryl Thomas with the Communications Division of the Community Oriented Policing Services Office, or the COPS office, as we'll call it. And Cheryl's going to present an overview of all the competitive funding programs for the fiscal year 23, and COPS hiring program, the school violence prevention program, community policing development program, law enforcement mental health and wellness act program, and the COPS anti-methamphetamine program and anti-heroin task force program. As you can see, there's a wealth of information, a lot of really good work that's going on. And I just want to say thank you for joining us. Cheryl, thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I really appreciate being here today. I am very happy to provide whatever information I can to everybody about what we've got available this year for COPS resources. So I am going to start sharing my slide presentation. Let's see if this works. Okay, Brianna, I'm getting a message telling me that host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, let's see. Adam, is there a way we can correct that in the back end?
Absolutely. Cheryl, you should be good now.
Okay, now I am. Thank you. Just a second. Okay, can you see that?
We sure can.
Okay, great. Then I will get started. Just to give everybody a little bit of background about the COPS office, we were established by the Crime Bill, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. And everything that we do is aimed at advancing public safety through community policing, looking at a proactive approach to policing. Since we were established in 1994, we've been appropriated more than $20 billion, and that's gone for a wide variety of purposes, including officers, funding officers, technology, new crime prevention initiatives, a lot of the things that I'll be talking about today. And to date, we've funded over 136,000 additional officer positions across the country. So COPS, just a little bit more about us. We are the only agency within the Department of Justice that's got policing in our title and is dedicated solely to supporting state, local, tribal law enforcement agencies. And just a little bit of information on what we've got this year. In terms of funding for FY23, we have $662.8 million to award. And we get our funding out to the field through three main ways. We've got sort of three buckets of funding. We have grants, training, and technical assistance. And I will go through all of the grants that we will be making available this year in just a bit, but it's for a wide variety of purposes, like I said, besides officers, which is really what we're known for. That's always been the largest amount of our funding, sort of our bread and butter program is for funding law enforcement positions. We also fund tribal law enforcement programs, school safety, anti-drug programs, everything you're going to hear today. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the training opportunities that we make available. There's in-person training. We have an online training portal. We do all sorts of active shooter response and de-escalation trainings. And then we also provide technical assistance to agencies with specific requests for assistance that are trying to get to a very specific issue they're experiencing. And you're going to hear all about that soon. So this is just a snapshot. These are the programs I'm going to be going over today and the funding that's available. And you will have access to this presentation after I am done. So don't worry about scribbling a lot of notes to yourself or trying to write down websites that you'll see in here. You will have access to it. But we will start with the first program. The COPS hiring program. It's been known by a number of different names over the years since 1994, but since 2010, we've been the COPS hiring program for this. And this is to fund the hiring or rehiring of career law enforcement officers. This is for state, local, territorial, and tribal law enforcement agencies. So long as they have primary law enforcement authority, they are eligible to apply. This year, we have up to $224.5 million available. And the grants fund up to 75% of the entry-level salary and fringe benefits for an officer position, and that's up to $125,000 per position. It's not $125,000 per year. It's $125,000 per officer over the life of the grant. It's a 5-year award period, but it's actually for 3 years of funding. We know that agencies are rarely able to go the minute they get an award. It takes time to recruit. It takes time to get officer candidates through the academy. So that we build in extra time. And so it provides 3 years of funding, but spread out over it can be over a 5-year period. We know that officers sometimes leave the agency and you have to backfill the position. So that's why you'll see, it sounds strange for 3 years of funding, but a 5-year period, but it's to build in time for those gaps. There is a minimum 25% cash match. We do have waivers. We will grant a waiver in cases of severe fiscal distress. That's done at the time of application. You provide the information and we will review it in terms of granting a waiver of the local match. And there's no cap on the number of officer positions you can request. Based on demand levels, we may have to cap awards on what we can make to agencies, but there's no cap on the incoming requests. And this is for newly hired officers or for officers, rehiring of officers who have been laid off or are scheduled to be laid off. We also have a 12-month retention requirement at the conclusion of the federal funding period. The idea is that each year you take a little bit less of the federal share and you put in more of the local share, so that at the end of the 3-year funding piece, you are able to assume the full cost of the officer position for at least 12 months following the conclusion of the award. So when agencies are applying for the COPS hiring program, they have to identify a public safety problem. That would be the focus of what those officer positions would be doing. You'll see there are 6 main areas listed. These are the areas from the 2022 application. Can't share the information with the 2023 yet until it becomes public, but they will be very, very similar to 2022. I can say that much. And you'll see there are 4 areas that are in blue, navy blue. Those are priority consideration areas. And basically these are administration priorities, and they do receive basically bonus points during the review process. So agencies requesting officers to combat those 4 top ones: violent crime, combating hate and domestic extremism, addressing police-based response to persons in crisis, and building legitimacy and trust. Those 4 areas would receive additional consideration during the review process. And as it says, the COPS office anticipates opening the COPS hiring program for this year in early March 2023. And you may be thinking, it is early March 2023. And all I can say is please stay tuned this week, later this week. I will move on to the School Violence Prevention Program. This is a program where under the Stop School Violence Act of 2018, there's funding that goes each year to the COPS office and some funding that goes to the Office of Justice programs for different purposes that align together under the Stop School Violence Act. So through the School Violence Prevention Program run through COPS, we address the 5 purposes listed there. It's coordination with law enforcement, training for local law enforcement officers to prevent student violence, what we basically think of as target hardening: metal detectors, locks, lighting, cameras, other deterrent measures, technology for expedited notification of local law enforcement during an emergency, which is basically a panic button system, and any other measures that don't fall into those 4 buckets neatly, providing a significant improvement in school security. We do not fund school resource officers through the School Violence Prevention Program. However, you can get funding for school resource officers through the COPS hiring program. One of the bullets, the last of those 6 purpose areas, was other innovations, and that's where that would fall. That's sort of the catch-all. This funding goes directly to states, units of local government, tribes, and other public agencies. Now, the public agencies includes law enforcement agencies, and it includes school districts. We do not provide funding directly to individual schools, but we will fund the school district. So I will move on. In 2023, through our appropriations, there's $53 million available. We will also have an additional $20 million coming through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and it's for the exact same purposes. So the 2 pots of funding do get combined to make awards under the School Violence Prevention Program. We have a maximum of $500,000 per award. Similar to the COPS hiring program, there is a 25% cash match unless we grant a waiver, again, in case of severe fiscal distress. It is a 3-year grant period. And we are opening this program in mid-March 2023, a couple more weeks until we open this one. The Anti-Heroin Task Force Program, and what I'm going to mention on the slide following this, the Anti-Methamphetamine Task Force Program. I want to call your attention to these. They are not made to local law enforcement. They only go to 1 state law enforcement agency per state. So in Georgia, in the past, it's been the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has received the funding for this. But the reason I'm mentioning these is we encourage local agencies to get with their state agency and discuss it, because these funding programs are task force based. So for the anti-heroin program, it's to combat heroin, fentanyl, carfentanil, other opioids, and it's for investigative purposes. It's not for funding Narcan. It's not for treatment. It is for investigations. And because it's a task force structure, as I said, the state agency that's funded has to work with partner with local law enforcement agencies to address the issues. So definitely make sure that your state agency is applying this year and find out how you can get involved with that task force. For the anti-heroin program, it's a maximum of $4 million per award. We have $35 million for the program this year. That program is currently open and will close at the end of April. And similar to the anti-heroin program, the anti-methamphetamine program is the same idea. It is for investigative purposes in combating methamphetamine distribution, trafficking. It's not for cleanup purposes, for example. These awards have a $1 million minimum. It's one of the rare ones that actually has a minimum, but a maximum of $2 million. We have $16 million available this year, and it has the same closing date of April 25th. Same task force structure, same idea. Just a brief mention, I don't believe this applies to anybody in your district, so just that we do fund tribal resources grants for a variety of safety purposes in Indian country. The Collaborative Reform Initiative. This is the technical assistance I mentioned earlier. We have 3 ways of offering technical assistance to agencies that are experiencing very specific issues. The first bullet that you'll see is our Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center, which is known as CRITAC. And this is one where if you're looking at a very specific problem that you want to address, maybe you've got issues with mass demonstrations going on and you're trying to figure out how to police those, or it can be every topic under the sun, open air drug markets, anything that you can imagine. You contact through our website, and that'll be coming up at the end, all the links you'll need. You can connect with CRITAC, and they will tailor the technical assistance that your agency might best benefit from. It can be connecting agencies, sort of a peer-to-peer way of sharing information between agencies that have had similar issues. It can be on-site assistance. It can be just pointing you in the right direction for trainings that you might need or other resources that would be useful. And the main thing about all of this is that it's free of cost to your agency. So please, if there's something that you need addressed, contact the center and they will help you out. The next 2 bullets are much more in-depth. Critical response is providing very targeted technical assistance to agencies that have had a high-profile event or a major incident, and they're looking to basically do an after-action and review to see what worked best and what would benefit the field most should incidents like that happen again. And the organizational assessment is a long-term assessment, basically a top-to-bottom review of your agency. These are only at agency request. We do not go in and do these proactively. And again, they are without any cost to your agency. So if you think you might be a candidate for something like this, if there's issues you want to discuss, please contact our agency and we'll make sure we connect you with the right people to talk through it and see what would work best for you. The Community Policing Development Program. This is sort of our innovative strategies, best practices funding. We have 5 category areas in 2023. These were included in our appropriations. They are spelled out for us. So the funding in 2023 will go towards crisis intervention, de-escalation training, accreditation, microgrants, and the last bullet, we will fund a training provider to put together training on tolerance, diversity, and anti-bias. The first 4 of those bullets, crisis intervention through COPS microgrants, your agencies are eligible to apply for. Crisis intervention, as it says, is expanding the use of crisis intervention teams. De-escalation training, we will both, part of our funding will go towards developing the training, and then part is to make sure that agencies can get that training. Accreditation, we will be assisting agencies in gaining accreditation. And COPS microgrants, this is seed money for very small scale projects that you're looking at. For example, if you've got an idea of creating an after school program where officers can work with students in the 3 to 6 p.m. hours, where students don't have any place else to go, and you want to create a hangout where officers can talk to them and sort of mentor them, and you just need seed money to get it started. This is that area of microgrants. It's seed money for projects that are small scale, but could be replicated. And if they're very successful, we want to hear about it, and then we can disseminate that information to the field of here's an example of what worked. We will be rolling out all of these programs throughout March. We don't want to open them all. They're all under the CPD Auspice 1 program, but the subparts will open on different days, so we don't have everybody trying to apply for all of them at the same time. We want to stagger the openings to make it a little easier for your agencies. The Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act program. This is one that we're very proud of. We know how much our officers do for us, and anything we can do to help the law enforcement field, we are very proud to offer. So LIMWA offers funding to improve mental health and wellness services in law enforcement agencies. It can be through suicide prevention programming, support for officer families, other emotional and mental health support, peer programming, peer mentoring, stress reduction. Agencies can apply individually or as a consortium of agencies. We were very pleased that this year our funding under this program expanded by, it went from 8 million to 10 million. So we're very happy to be able to offer this to the field. The program is currently open and it will close on April 21st. Wanted to very briefly mention our Preparing for Active Shooter Situations training. This is not training that you apply for to us. We fund one training provider and then the training is made available to agencies at no cost. So it's we fund ALERT, the Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training at Texas State University. And they are really the gold star standard for active shooter training. This is scenario-based training. It can be done if you get a bunch of agencies together to request it, the ALERT can come on site or you can travel to ALERT, and there's online options. So a number of different active shooter training options available to you. Again, at no cost. And the website is available at the end of that slide. And one quick mention of our COPS office training portal. We have dozens of classes available, no cost means for law enforcement agencies to get some very vital training. The website is right there. Last year, 25,000 people took advantage of this free training. And just some very quick tips on applying. Please start the application process early. There are 2 parts to every application. You do the first part in grants.gov and the second part in Just Grants, the DOJ grant application system. There were 2 different deadlines provided in all of my deadline dates. One is for starting it in grants.gov and the other is finishing it in Just Grants. But definitely do not wait until the application deadline date to start the process. It does take a bit of time to get through it. Please read the instructions and make sure you've gotten everything in your submission before you submit it. Save it frequently while you're working on it. And there are some links to a tutorial on how to walk you through the process and some tips for applying. And lastly, we've got some contact information there. We have hundreds of publications, documents, research papers available, guidebooks to your agency that you can get through our website. I've got our contact number there and all of our different social media links. And that concludes my portion until I believe we'll take questions at the end. So after OJP presents, so that concludes my portion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. You know, I know that my staff has this, and of course, we're going to ask that we keep this slide show, but I have just been, writing down so much information about the things that I know that I want to be able to really make accessible to our district. So thank you so very much. It's just so definitely informative, and thank you for all that you're doing to make sure that we have this information. And next, it's actually my honor to introduce Betsy Griffith, who is the Bureau of Justice Assistant Associate Deputy Director. And she will actually present for the Office of Justice Programs. And Betsy's presentation will mainly focus on the many funding opportunities for state crisis intervention programs that are made possible by the historic bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This law is the first substantive gun violence prevention passed in almost 30 years. And I'm so proud to say that many aspects of my Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act were included in this package, which secures $750 million in crisis prevention funding for over 5 years. So excited about the work we've been able to do. This is just the beginning. But Betsy, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your support of this important work and, really helping communities that I think are facing some significant challenges, but with resources and to be able to support and share ideas across the country. I think we can really address this critical issue and prevent future violence and build capacity to respond when unfortunately some things happen. I'm so excited to be here today. And what I'm going to do is start with a little bit of an overview, and then I'll take a little while to talk about the community violence intervention and prevention initiative that is part of Safer Communities, follow up with some other funding that we have available generally to support people who are in crisis. And then I will close out with the larger program that was just mentioned that's now in planning at the state level and resources that may be available to support you in your jurisdiction as well. So again, I'm with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. If we can go to the next slide, I just want to give a little bit of a bigger context. As was mentioned, BJA, or the Bureau of Justice Assistance, is part of the Office of Justice Programs. So we have a number of components who focus on different activities that really are designed to help state, tribal, and local jurisdictions address gaps and build capacity. We really do this with a belief that the best work is really out there day by day, the work that you all do, the work that you support for those of you that may write grants, that work with other leaders in criminal justice, but also in behavioral health, in other system players and community leaders that really are such an important part of this solution. And what we really do a lot is to identify and support those folks with training, technical assistance, and grants, but also really spend time kind of helping them collaborate and take time to collaborate across the Office of Justice Programs, and work in conjunction with our colleagues at the COPS office, as well as the Office on Violence Against Women. I'll talk about BJA in a moment, but we do have agencies that focus on collecting data about what's happening in terms of crime and victimization through our Bureau of Justice Statistics. We also do a lot of research and evaluation of programs and program models in partnership with the National Institute of Justice. And it's always important in this work, we do not forget the victim, the impact of the victim, and ways we can support them in conjunction for our Office for Victims of Crime. BJAs I'll talk about focuses on the adult criminal justice system and the communities that we work with. Our colleagues at the Office on Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, or OJJDP, focus with youth and families, and also youth that are involved in the juvenile justice system. And finally, we have our SMART office that works with the issue of sex offender sentencing, monitoring, apprehension, registration, and tracking, and bring that expertise to the table. Next slide. As I mentioned, BJA is an agency that focuses on the adult system and really does this in the same way that we talked about with the COPS office, through grants, but also through benefits programs, payment programs, and really working, as I'll talk about in the structure, to really kind of figure out what are those emerging or critical issues where we can also help through training and technical assistance to build capacity, to create tools, really with the goal, as we've stated here, around reducing crime, reducing recidivism, reducing unnecessary confinement, but at the same time making sure we're still promoting a safe and fair criminal justice system. And really, as part of that, helping criminal justice agencies build a culture where they are really good leaders, or at the head of it, and they have the school tools and skills that they need, either from BJA or working with the COPS office, to really be able to support that work. So I think you'll see those kinds of TTA activities from BJA as well. Next slide. So our director is Carlton Moore. Carlton worked at the state level for several decades, which is kind of amazing when you think about changes that happen at the state level, but he worked at the state level, and I think has an appreciation and understanding of, how important the work is that happens at the state level, but also at the local level, kind of on the ground. So it's great to have his leadership around this. The way we're structured, I work in the policy office. You will tend to interact with us in the policy shop when we're at that, hey, we've got some new resources, or maybe we don't even have a ton of resources, but we're hearing from the field about an issue. We engage, we do listening sessions, we build program plans and make recommendations about where investment should be. We manage the competitive funding processes. And then once awards are made, we work with our programs office, but we bring expertise, with a lot, several hundred years of experience of people who have done that actually work in the field, whether it is being a probation officer, a law enforcement officer, someone with courts experience, being able to bring that subject matter expertise to the table, so that as we're developing these products, we know that they're relevant and helpful for the field. And then we really work day to day with our programs office, who manage the grants as they're being awarded, and they also handle all the formula funds, cradle to grave, to be able to support people in building the capacity to manage grants effectively, make sure we're being good stewards of the funding and supporting that work. We have our cross-cutting office in the operations shop that really helps us think about budget, communications, works with us to collect data, and works with you all at the local level when you get those grants through the performance management tool to collect data, so that we can tell the story about like what we are getting for our investments, and also working with Congress, to be able to speak to them again about the investments that they have entrusted to us. And then finally, we are very honored to have the Public Safety Officers Benefit Program that offers benefits and death benefits and education benefits to fallen first responders, law enforcement officers, and others who are injured in the line of duty. Next slide. I'm not today going to be able to cover everything that we do at BJA. We have an annual budget this year of over $2.6 billion, several big formula programs, some of which we'll cover today. I'm going to focus in particular on programs related to people in crisis. At the end, though, please pay attention, because what you'll see is we've really tried to organize information about all our funding opportunities. You can also look at the program plan that talks to you a little bit about what it is we plan to fund each year. We do some webinars to cover those activities at the beginning of the year, and also ones that are more broadly based around just what are those tips that you need to make sure you cover to get prepared for writing those grants at the beginning of the season. All of those are then recorded and placed up on the website, and I'll talk later about that. But in the work that we do, we really focus in these 5 major strategic focus areas. I talked a little bit about these at the high level. Again, the focus today will be on that connection between interventions with criminal justice, communities, and behavioral health related needs. Before we go into these, I do want to mention, and I apologize, for some reason I missed the slide, but I will pop it back in before I send a final draft that you all can have access to. But I do want to just mention that we, and perhaps somebody can share the link. I put it in the chat. Our new Community Violence Intervention and Prevention Initiative, and we are incredibly grateful for the support from Congresswoman McBath's office for this work. It is so incredible. What we recognize is in our communities, there are folks that are at high risk. They're at high risk for being victims of violence. They're at high risk for being involved in violence. And there can be conflict that's happening between people. And that a lot of this can be related to prior trauma people have experienced, lack of opportunities, and through community-based interventions that both work with folks that can be trusted messengers that may have that same life experience, working with points of crisis, whether it is conflict that we know is happening in a concentrated location in a community, or in communities where those community-based partners can work with them, but also that moment that happens after a shooting when someone is a victim, and how do we engage and partner with our public health partners, with our hospitals, emergency rooms, to really also engage on that side. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to meet a trauma surgeon from a hospital in Atlanta, who was a part of our new CVI work, which we launched a few weeks ago in St. Louis. $100 million is available last year in making those awards, and will be available very soon. And I'll be happy to share that information when we have it, about additional funding really being available around the CVI work. We have an implementation checklist. We will put that up in the chat. I really encourage you to kind of walk through that as you're thinking about preparing to work on a CVI activity. We will fund new activities as well as the implementation of enhancement of work that's already happening. And we fund kind of a wide range. The way we structure the program is you don't have to apply in something that you're doing with hospitals separate from what you might be doing in the community. It's really more based on who you are that is applying. So both community-based organizations can apply and government-based organizations can apply for those resources. We also have a category where if maybe you have a regional approach you want to do, and you have community-based organizations that may have more limited capacity that you want to work with. So we have an intermediary category, as we call it, or capacity building, where an entity can apply and then receive funding to make multiple awards and provide them technical assistance. And now, as kind of a follow-on to a series of webinars we did last year, the creation of this checklist that I've referenced, that is a resource we'll get to you as a follow, and this conference that we just hosted a couple of weeks ago out in St. Louis. We're going to put out this year's solicitation. And then we have several new training and technical assistance providers in this program that will both work with the new grantees we just funded, but we're also really going to focus on helping others that are thinking about and planning and preparing for this work. So next slide. This really is a good example of how we do the work, right? We have funding-based solicitations that are out there. They've been informed by dialogue with the field, with experts in the field, and each year we try to kind of tweak and improve them as we learn about what's happening on the ground. We then work with the technical assistance providers with those sites that got funded to figure out what do they need? How do we help them build capacity? And then as we're learning with those sites, we continue to translate and educate the rest of the field to learn and research. We'll be working with NIJ to do some research and evaluation activities, and then immediately try to translate that through our resource center through that educational function that we fulfill. At the same time, we know we want to reach everybody, right, who has these needs. So we'll be creating tools that are more broadly available to the field and products so that we're translating those lessons more broadly as well. And finally, one of the things that was interesting in this work was that we have a lot of interest of philanthropic organizations in a number of these issues around violence, including the CVI work, including work around the extreme risk orders and those sorts of things. So we also are thinking about ways that we can make sure people know about those local philanthropic partners and foundations that can help, as well as other partners. Criminal justice partners, law enforcement alone cannot solve these issues around folks in crisis. We also have to make sure and work with our colleagues across other entities, including behavioral health, to be able to solve those issues. Next slide. And so with that in mind, I'm going to quickly go through a number of these programs, but just as a quick reminder or guide for those of you who may not be aware, we really have kind of several different kinds of grant programs, and then we also have some payment programs like the Public Safety Officers Benefits Program. But the majority of the money is really concentrated here in our discretionary programs. We have a number of those. I'm going to go through a number of those programs in a couple minutes. The State Crisis Intervention Program, or the SCIP program, that was funded under Safer Communities, as one of our formula programs, along with our Justice Intervention, Assistance Grant Program. Those are very large programs that will go out to states, sometimes to locals as well, based on a formula. So we'll talk a little bit about those in a moment. The eligibility will vary. So in most cases, state and local and tribal agencies are eligible, often with a criminal justice nexus, obviously, but sometimes we also have programs where nonprofits or academic institutions may be eligible. So you hear me talk a little bit about this. And then formulas, as I mentioned, are generally administered by like a state administrating office agency and are based on some sort of formula. For example, the JAG program is based on a combination of violent crime and population to sort of inform how much funding is made available. Next slide. Okay, so behavioral health, this is really where I'm going to focus. I'll go quickly through these, but these slides will be available later. What I want to just emphasize is we have like a huge range of resources that are available. Happy to answer questions at the end, so I am going to go quickly on these, but a lot of these are open right now, so please, get in there and take a look. We really encourage you to apply. A number of these programs are larger. We're funding large proportions of applicants. So really think about applying or at least looking at the related training and TA resources to prepare for next year. So here we go. Next slide. For folks who have high risk for overdose, and unfortunately we have seen a huge increase in the last 2 years in overdose fatalities, often related to people who think they're taking something else and there's fentanyl in it and they're overdosing and they're unprepared. Over 107,000 people died in 2001 of an overdose fatality. Similar numbers we believe are going to come in for 22. We are very concerned about this, and COSUP is really our way of supporting this on a whole range of issues, from EMS and law enforcement response to that and crime associated with substance use issues, to diversion to treatment along every point along the sequential intercept model, from law enforcement diversion to court-based diversion to corrections-based programming in the community, in institutional settings, and then really thinking about that at the back end. So really those opportunities to figure out those different places where you need to intervene and build your capacities. This is a place where harm reduction connects on focus around things like distribution and education around naloxone. If we can keep people alive, we can get them into treatment. Also, the use of things like fentanyl test strip, given this increase we are seeing with, unexpected fentanyl and what really people are starting to call poisoning in the drugs that they're using, as well as education with youth, work with families, next slide, and a number of different areas. There's a number, you can see how broad it is. COSUP is a very broad program. And again, we try to do it by saying, hey, if you're this size jurisdiction, that's the category you apply in, versus sort of forcing you to just focus in 1 or 2 areas or have to write multiple applications. So next slide, these are pretty large awards. The funding can go up to 1.1 million for smaller jurisdictions, 1.6 for larger jurisdictions, and state awards up to $7 million. These applications are due at the end of the month. And I'll use this moment to just briefly mention to you, we have a new 2-part process as of the last couple of years. And so things first, you must, and this is where I just really encourage you, go in, take a look, make sure you've got your registration set up for SAM, make sure you can get yourself registered with your SAM registration and what is in essence a lobbying document, and submit that by your first deadline, and then you will be eligible to put your full application in on the second one. Next slide, let's go to some other topics. Connect and protect, for those who might be interested in law enforcement responses, particularly to people with significant mental health issues. Again, COSUP will fund co-occurring substance abuse, substance use, and mental health issues. Connect and protect is very much focused on people with severe mental health issues and really building collaborative approaches. Next slide. We're making about 30 awards. It's a little bit smaller amount. Again, more of a targeted program for law enforcement, but a little more time to apply for these. Your deadline on this is May 1st. Next one, next slide. We're also out there doing some training for law enforcement around virtual reality de-escalation training. Really excited about this new program in 2023. This is really going to let us help law enforcement agencies adopt innovative virtual reality technology training. We really want to help with this de-escalation. We recognize some folks in crisis are out there, and we need to make sure law enforcement have the training, and it's really like something that they know how to respond in a way that something that might seem to be confrontation is actually coming from a different place, maybe because of their mental health state. So how do we build those skills for law enforcement to really have those skills down pat, not just classroom training, but this virtual reality training. And so hoping to work with a small number of tribes, I apologize, law enforcement agencies, and really help them test this out and continue to grow this program. Next slide. other work we're doing in this area and space with law enforcement and folks with significant mental health issues. I apologize, I'm hurrying. There's a lot of content. We have a resource center, but we also have funding for state grants and local grants and tribal, and also on the corrections side to really build this crisis response training that's available for folks. So we've got a couple categories, and next slide, you can see a little bit on that's due. Those applications are due at the end of May, beginning of May, and smaller, really kind of targeted training, CIT related strategies. Next slide. Now we're moving more into the issues of folks with dementia or developmental disabilities. And I just want to quickly flag, I'm going to be super fast on this one, the Covenant Avante law. This is funding that really helps folks plan and come up with strategies and tools that help with issues around quick response and also preventing wandering, and really ensuring folks' safety, as well as training and awareness really around these issues. And again, folks' responses. The next slide. And as you can see on this particular program, applications are again due at the end of the month and small, but really, give that opportunity to build this as one of those set of skills that you really need to have in law enforcement agencies to help folks that can be in crisis for a number of different reasons. Next slide. And now I think we're moving on to more of our rest of our system. We've got a couple different programs. Again, this is more specifically on folks with severe mental health issues. In addition to the law enforcement programs I've mentioned, we've got this justice and mental health program that really helps with cross-cutting, particularly from courts through corrections, opportunities to really think about ways that we can build capacity and ability to increase mental health access, and really recognizing that those folks really need help with stabilization and management. There is no like cure per se. So how do you kind of build those long-term strategies in your criminal justice system to be able to partner with behavioral health around that? Next slide. These awards are about $500,000 and again due at the end of March. And new slide, we also do similar work around our treatment court programming, which I think there's some slides after this. I will just say briefly about those and we'll go quickly through that. So treatment courts are really for folks that have substance use disorders that are very high risk, high need. They currently under the adult treatment court cannot focus on folks who are at risk for violence or have a history of violence, although our veterans treatment court funding, which I'll talk about, will also complement that. But I did want to just mention briefly that if you have areas, and again, I'm only giving you sort of a small fraction, but if you had other areas where you might want to build some capabilities and skills that are a little more creative, similar to the way the COPS office had discussed, we will support state or local or tribal or regional tests of a model or national strategies to really address work. And in-field initiated this year, we will have some resources sort of focus on potentially responding to increases of crime related to persons that are in crisis. So that solicitation's not out, but I encourage you to keep an eye out for it if you want to work in that space. Next slide. And then we also have our, in addition to the treatment court resources, we have work on the sort of back end under our Second Chance Act to be able to support people that are doing work in reentry, both to help with stabilization for folks as they come out that have significant mental health issues. There are also some treatment-based Second Chance Act related solicitations. And you can see that we'll really be working together to be able to support this work. Some of these solicitations are not currently out, but keep an eye out. And I have a couple slides at the end about how to find them. Next slide. Oh, this one is open and closes at the end of March. Next slide. Community courts are kind of another way that we can be doing this work, where you might see a concentration in a community of folks that are in crisis and need our support. And can offer the kinds of interventions I've been talking about, but by placing them in the community and working with community-based partners. So that solicitation is not currently open, but will be opening in the next month or so. Next slide. And then I did talk about the treatment court programs a little bit. Again, these are significant funding streams, places where we're able to fund high levels of applications. And if we come to the next slide, We're looking to fund about 40 applications, pretty significant funding streams. And I do want to flag these were a pretty significant increase from last year, the last couple of years, up to $1 million for your site single applications, and then 2.5 at the state level. And applications for those are due in April. Next slide. I do want to just flag recognizing Congresswoman McBath's support for veterans, that we also have resources available to support veterans. And we're really placing an emphasis here on making sure we're helping criminal justice agencies use tools that the VA has created, including the Square tool, which is a tool really available for law enforcement, as well as the VRSS system that works well with courts and corrections to identify who of the people that are coming through are veterans, and how do we partner with the VA, and really also have an understanding of the impact of how one's service, whether it's PTSD, whether it is traumatic brain injury or some sort of disability, that can make that transition back very challenging. And so these are considerations that really need to be identified early, and thinking about ways that we can kind of make that access to programming and things like the Veterans Treatment Court available to them. So that is also open right now, closes in April. Next slide. And we're looking to make about 20 awards in that area. Let me keep rolling. I apologize. I know it's a lot of programs. Next slide. As I mentioned very earlier, I'm going to go very quickly to say, you strongly recommend, if you don't already, build a relationship with, first of all, go to our website. There can be local awards that are made to your jurisdiction that might be a resource you want to leverage, and kind of collaborate with some of the other investments that your jurisdiction's making. The state has that capability to take the funding and then recompete local awards. Great to build that state administrating agency relationship. You can see it's a lot of money and very flexible funding, right? So there's information up on our website about who the state administrating agency staff are. Really encourage you, as well as who is getting these awards. So really encourage you to take a look at that and think about how you can leverage that. And the next slide, most importantly, so excited to now announce that we just made awards very recently under the Safer Communities Act for the State Crisis Intervention Program, or BURN SCIP as we call it. And this is funding that's gone to the state level, and now states are doing planning. They have to put together these crisis intervention advisory boards, and you can see very broad representation, and really will help with the creation and implementation of extreme risk protection order programs, but also other capacities for courts to really think about and manage this work effectively, work with pretrial, the judiciary, and others to be making good informed decisions about these risks, so we can keep people safe and connect this with other court-based intervention and reduction programs that are happening, and other gun violence generally, but also, sharing of information so that we're keeping people safe in this work. And very pleased that we'll have just announced this past week 3 awards to do training and technical assistance. One will focus on developing and supporting extreme risk protection order programs. So really helping you all think about how to do that work as you're thinking about how those resources might get used, or some of the other ones I'm talked about today. Also supporting state, local, and tribal courts, really thinking about what I have these new risks, these things I need to manage for, what are the considerations, what are the tools, and also partnering with treatment courts to kind of build capabilities there. And then finally, really thinking about the role of the state agencies who are managing the SCIP funding, but also that JAG money that I was talking about. How does this all get coordinated? There are strategic plans going on. This is a critical issue. We know violent crime, unfortunately, has been rising in the last couple of years. How do we get out there and, really make sure you have the tools and information you need to do the job? And I think that is it for me, other than to say there's a couple slides in here which we can just keep going through and maybe open it up for questions. But please take a look at our website and see what resources we have, and also get registered and get notified when solicitations come out, but also think about being a peer reviewer. Always looking for new peer reviewers.
Betsy, thank you so much. And at this time, we will go to questions. We've got a question here from Miranda regarding an equal employment plan. Miranda, I'm going to take you live so you can ask your question. You should be able to speak now. Miranda, are you still with us? I'll go ahead and read the question that I got from her. She asked, does this funding require an equal employment plan 28 CFR Part 42? And is this funding part of the Safe Street Act? I believe this came a little bit earlier in your presentation, Betsy. I apologize, we can't get Miranda on to clarify.
I will admit I would want to have to go back and clarify, and maybe I can follow up just to make sure I am being completely technically accurate. But what I will say generally is, we do generally as an organization have requirements around, general compliance overall, for, when you get a grant around civil rights compliance and compliance with federal laws. And we have an office that really focuses on that, and that there are special conditions and requirements you're signing off on when you apply. And that would be managed as part of kind of that grants management process, and reviewed by our colleagues in our civil rights division of the Office of Justice Programs. So there is general requirement around the American with Disabilities Act and other, federal requirements relating to civil rights protections.
Fantastic. And Miranda, if you are still on the call with us, if you'd like to follow up with any specific questions that we can help get you an answer on, please reach out to our office. I've got a couple questions from Samantha. I'm going to try to bring you live so you can ask your questions. Samantha, you are able to speak if you'd like to ask your question of the COPS office. We might be having some technical difficulties, but I'll go ahead and read that question. The first question from her is, how does the COPS office define primary law enforcement authority? So Cheryl, would you like to address that piece?
Sure. We define primary law enforcement authority as basically if your agency is the one that picks up the call when there's a call for service. If somebody calls 911 and your agency answers that call, you've got primary law enforcement authority. So that's how we're looking at it.
Fantastic. And one more question from Samantha. She asked, do you help agencies develop program plans as well? And I believe that might be for either of you, but apologies, there's not much more context there.
Yeah, I don't think that's for COPS necessarily, but the answer would be no, unfortunately, that we don't.
Fantastic.
I think if you are developing an action plan, you'll see in a number of our solicitations, there's an opportunity to kind of build the sort of infrastructure for a program plan or action plan for a particular area of work. But then we're going to really encourage you to take some time. We often encourage or mandate research partnerships really to be able to collect data and do some analysis throughout the life of the program. So in those kinds of programs, you're going to probably get there. If you, let me just say at any time, if you just generally, and I'll make sure the NTAC slide is on there, we have a National Training and Technical Assistance Center. I know the COPS office also has, outlined a couple of different topical areas, but if you just have a general request, even if you're not a grantee, you can always come to us, and it might be NTAC as an entity, or they might make a referral. Maybe we have, in that area, the ability to, help with some strategic planning. For example, if it's a court-based program and you want to make sure you're looking at ensuring speedy trial, and you would like to put together a program plan in that area, we have some technical assistance and a provider available that could help. So we also do some matching through that. That might be a way to kind of help in those areas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Betsy. At this time, we don't have any more open questions, but I first of all want to thank Betsy and Cheryl, and apologies from the Congresswoman. She did have to jump into her next meeting. But as the Congresswoman said, this presentation and documents from our presenters will be available to attendees following this morning's event. Oh, we did have one more question pop through, and if it's all right, I will take that. It's from Samantha, and she asks about the EEOP plan. If the county, she asks, can the county government administer the grant if the sheriff's office is the agency that is eligible?
So for BJA, that would really depend on the program. And so what I really encourage you to do, like you go to the first page and it tells you who is eligible to apply. Sometimes, like we have multiple programs where specifically law enforcement and prosecutors are eligible to apply. In other cases, it might be government, right? So in that case, I think it would be fine for the government entity to apply. So really kind of depends upon that. The other thing I would say is in all of our solicitations, there's a link to the call center, and there's also, you'll see it on the slide. If you have any questions about a solicitation, two things. One is please always feel free to call our call center, even if it's like a simple question. They've got a lot of good understanding of, any of those questions that might come up when you're applying for a grant, but also if they can't answer it, they'll work with us to kind of get it documented. And then if we're getting that question, we'll actually put it up as a frequently asked question. And then the second thing I would say is feel free to always bring those to, if a solicitation webinar has not occurred, feel free to register, and then you can ask those questions specific to that program in the solicitation webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're just really lucky to have you two with us today. Appreciate all of your expertise and your time. And again, our presentation and resources will be made available to everyone via email following this morning's presentation. If you do discover that you have a question for our experts or for our office, please reach out to us. I am happy to answer any questions that I can from our Duluth office. I know Brianna is our wonderful resource in our Washington office, and we're just happy to help in any way that we can. On behalf of the Congresswoman, I do want to also plug her federal grant support program. If you haven't already, please sign up for our federal grants newsletter by going to mcbath.house.gov/grant-applications. I just put that in the chat for everyone. It's a monthly newsletter that we send identifying opportunities, federal grant applications for local stakeholders. And that also includes information about our federal grant support program. So the Congresswoman always wants to know if you're applying for some of these federal grants that have been talked about this morning. Please feel free to let us know and fill out that grant support request form so that the Congresswoman can consider writing a letter in support of your grant application. I'll also drop Brianna's email in the chat. Everyone should have my email from our invitations, but Brianna's email is in the chat as well. One moment, I'll drop that. And I appreciate everyone's participation today. And again, please feel free to reach out if you have questions. And once again, thank you to our presenters, and I hope everyone has a great week ahead.